Let's play.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action.
This is Mark Waid, writer of Superman Birthright.
And you're listening to The Krypton Report.
And you're listening to Krypton Report.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird.
It's a plane! It's the Krypton Report!
The All Things Kryptonian podcast, including Superman and Supergirl.
We discuss games, movies, cartoons, TV shows, and comics.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Hey everybody, welcome to the Krypton Report. This is me, Tyler. I have a very special episode here. This is a segment of my crossover episode I did with my man Phil. The great Phil, the great one, you know, Phil the Great and Powerful that I always talk about, over on Capes and Lunatics for Nightwing News. And we're chatting with Dan Jurgens. We discuss Superman and Nightwing and all of his other writings. But here is part of my Superman discussion with Dan. I highly recommend everyone go and check out Capes and Lunatics and Nightwing News especially, because it's great. And Phil recently did an interview with Kyle Higgins that I was blessed to be a part of, and then coming up one with Tim Seeley. So check out the Dan Jurgens interview, and here we go. I'm enjoying the conversation. I admit I'm a little behind on my Nightwing reading because I was really turned off on the whole Rick thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Phil's kind of won me back over, and I was trying to catch up.
Oh, yeah, this man turned it around.
I have not caught up. I just wanted to be on the recording to get to talk with you.
Okay. That's cool.
I mean,
I know you're huge.
I mean,
you two are also huge Superman fans. So.
Oh,
yeah. If you just look behind me, you can see some of my stuff.
Once, when I was still working on Superman, someone came up to me and said, well, you know, wouldn't it be easier to write Batman because he's so human and Superman is this alien? I said, well, you know, in a way, Batman is way more alien than Superman is. And Clark Kent is way more human than Bruce Wayne. So I don't know. But I did make that point.
Just made that.
Clark's a good guy.
That's a good point. That's going to be my new sound bit. I'm just going to play it everywhere. Like, oh.
All right. The work we did as part of Rebirth on Action Comics and some of the stuff that we did when we crossed over with the Superman title, which Pete Tomasi and Pat Gleason were writing. I think that's some really strong stuff. I think it helped bring back kind of this core of who Superman is. I think the Superman Lois and Clark series I did that Lee Weeks drew, which really brought this married version of Superman and Lois back into the DCU and introduced John Kent, I think is really strong and still pertinent today because that is kind of that part of the foundation that has gotten us to this point where we have John.
That's what I was going to ask about. I was waiting my time. I wanted to let Phil do his thing.
It's like we planned everything,
ask
right?
Your Superman question.
I know. Look at that segue. Oh,
yeah.
Good job.
No, I wanted to point out that I loved your Lois and Clark run.
Thank you.
I loved that mini. You're very welcome. And the whole so the year that came out, you know, being in 2015, I think that's the year my son was born.
Oh,
so reading the Superman Superman as a dad, I loved, and just being a new dad myself and reading this, I thought was just great, and I loved just that whole mini series. I loved the convergence where John was born, and then into Rebirth Action, and I feel like Rebirth, Superman and Action, those two books together has been some of the best Superman writing in continuity comics in a long time.
Thanks. I appreciate that very much. And, I think we're all happy with the way it turned out. And this idea that Superman has been around since 1938. And I think the job of any writer is to always add to this tremendous legacy, this tapestry of the character. And, when I did Superman in the 90s, I think we really did that with the death of stuff and so many other things. And I think this time around, I wanted to add to it in a very different way. And they went along with this idea of John Kent and let us make him a permanent part of the DC universe. And this idea of Superman putting the black suit back on to kind of work behind the scenes in his in John's younger days and everything. It was just a lot of fun to be able to do. And Lee Weeks was just tremendous on the art. And I think it became very, like I said earlier, foundational to where Superman is now.
Was the John when you took over, like when you were writing in Convergence and like John was born, were there plans to bring him in? Was like John that idea? Like did that come from you or did that come from editorial? Like,
oh no,
where did that come from?
In terms of coming from editorial, it was quite the opposite because when we had decided to do sort of the 5 years later stunt as part of Future's End and where is everybody now? One of the things they said is, all right. No kids. No one gets to have any kids if we're going to look at these characters 5 years later, because that's what everybody will come up with. So as we got into the Convergence idea, I did tell Dan DiDio that, if we have Lois give birth and there they are with young John, that child can represent the future of DC some way, somehow. And we didn't know how. I even said, maybe the Convergence world dies and Superman and Lois put this child in a rocket and send him off into space and he's soaring off to the stars. And that becomes your future somehow. And who knows what that'll be, but it's an idea that takes us down the road. And as we started working on it, there were various ideas for what would happen to John. And eventually it was part of, let's just bring that version of Superman back to the DC universe, because with the New 52 version, they had gotten to the point where that Superman and Lois really didn't have a relationship. They weren't married. It was a very different look. And I think a lot of readers were lost again. And again, it was part of that randomness and not having context for the character, because a lot of what they had known was now gone. And we were able to bring that back into place with Superman, Lois, and Clark.
And like I was saying, out of any other character, I love the idea of Superman as a father. I love reading those stories and him dealing with that. And, my son now loves Superboy, and I show him the John Kent stuff, and he gets a kick out of that. He doesn't like when he finds out there's Superboy that's young Clark Kent. He gets mad about that.
Okay.
But when you were given did you ask for it? Was it given to you to do the miniseries? Or did it just come about like, hey, do this so we can segue into Rebirth easier? Or was it always planned?
No, in a little bit, well, yes and no. I mean, the one thing I will always say is people want to think of creation as being like this straight line, and it never is. It's kind of up and down and back and forth, and one idea goes forward 2 steps, and then you jump back because it wasn't working, and then you start over again, and it's always sort of messy is what I'm saying. But I had introduced John as part of the Convergence event that left us with Superman and Lois and this young child. And by Superman and Lois, it was the more historical version. And as part of Rebirth, DC had made the decision that they wanted to get back to something like that. So this again is where Dan DiDio said, is there a way to do a series here? We kind of think, would you be interested in something called Superman, Lois, and Clark that tells us the next story in their life? And I said, well, sure. And here's what we can do. And we find out that the worlds have blended and this Superman has been in the background on Earth all this time wearing the black suit. And, you start having those conversations, and those conversations can end up leading to more. So it's not as easy as having the puzzle all figured out when you first start talking about it. And it's those conversations and those various ideas that develop and then take you farther down the road.
This will be my last question, Phil, and I'll give the power back to you. How was it sharing like the Superman Reborn storyline? You did 2 issues, and there was 2 issues done from Superman and all tied together. How was that work together with doing like the red and the blue? Like, where did that idea come from of being like the way to bring it all together?
Yeah, the situation we were looking at is, so we had kind of gotten to the point where we had two versions of Superman. We had the New 52 one and the version I had done in Lois and Clark. And the question was, do we just have one left over or the other one left over, or do we somehow combine them? And the feeling was that if we combine these two versions, it's playing a little more straight with the readers. So we decided to do that, and it was as simple as Peter Tomasi and Pat Gleason and I, we all get along very well. And we just sat in a room with the editorial group and said, okay, let's bash this out. How can this work? And earlier, we kind of knew we were targeting that. So we had come up with this idea in my book where we had a very specific Superman and Clark Kent. And it was kind of like, how can you have Superman and Clark Kent at the same time? And it was Mixyaz-Pitalik masquerading as Clark Kent. And that then, his efforts and his world is what gave us the solution to combining these characters and kind of turning that corner so that everything was back in place and able to work again. And I know it sounds really complicated, but it wasn't. It was just let's use this magical imp named Mixyaz-Pitalik, and he's our excuse to get us out of this hole that we were sort of in.
See, I think it worked great, and I don't know, did you guys look back at what Grant Morrison had done in Action Comics 1 when the New 52 launched? Just because I just reread, and I reread all of that into Rebirth. That was a task last year. But he has Mixie doing some things, and there was actually a panel in it where you see Superman Red and Superman Blue, and they're talking. And I messaged my friend like, oh my gosh, it's almost like they predicted what would happen back then at Rebirth. And I just want to know, like, was there ever like a reference back to that Mixie adventure before you guys wrote your story?
Not that I recall. I think part of it is more driven by this, which is when you go down the list of who of Superman's villains could have kind of devised some of this, there aren't that many. And Mixyaz-Pitalik was a logical one. And of course, this whole idea of Superman Red and Superman Blue is one that was first introduced in the 60s anyway. I mean, we played around with it in the 90s. So
I got number one right over there.
Okay, well, yeah, it became a natural way to go, right?
I'm just impressed with how easily the name of that imp rolls off your tongue.
Oh, well, you spend enough time working on Superman and you get to learn it, right?
What were you calling Tyler? Mitzi?
I just call him Mixie because I get like stuck on the sounds, and I'm like, I sound more like I'm stuttering.
Okay. Here's a Superman question. I mean, is Superman, out of all the characters that you didn't create yourself, do you think you understand Superman the best just because you've written so much Superman?
Probably. I don't know if I quite think of it as understanding him the best. I think part of it is that understanding comes with the amount of work that you do. I think I have a very, very clear idea of the character. Almost as though if there's a situation with, that Clark Kent finds himself in or Superman finds himself in, I feel like I know the character well enough to say, yes, this is how he would react. This is what he would say. Now, that's just my opinion. It doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make me wrong, because other writers may very well differ with that. But for the most part, when you work that long with a specific character, yes, you kind of get to that point where you have that sort of understanding.
So you'd say Superman is probably one of the easiest for you to write now, just because you've developed that Superman muscle, I guess.
I don't, part of it is because I've done so much.
Or is it harder?
It can be harder because I don't want to repeat myself. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to repeat yourself, if you're cognizant and conscious about, cutting some new cloth at the same time and hitting some new areas, that actually can be harder. If you're working on a character you've never worked on before, like I say, everybody has, two great Popsicle Man ideas, right? And they'll all walk up to the editor of Popsicle Man and say, I have this great idea for Popsicle Man. And it's the greatest thing ever. And the conversation should be, yeah, we get it. That's a great idea. But then what do you do for the next 35 issues, right? And so with Superman, it's like, for me, I've done a lot. and it's what can I say that's new that I haven't said before.
All right, Tyler, you got another question?
Yeah, I was going to wait till the end, but I mean, yeah. I just wanted to ask this one thing because this is something that kind of bothered me. With it being your character that you created, how do you feel, if you can say, about how John Kent was treated in the current run when they took him from being the boy, aged him up, and what they've done with him since?
Oh, I think there's this assumption out there that like Brian, Michael Bendis and I don't get along or something like that. And the fact is we're friends.
I don't know. I just wondered.
Okay. So, and I think everybody sort of has that idea. That's not the case. When Brian first came to DC, he and I and a couple of folks from DC went out to lunch, and Brian was telling me right from the start his plans for the character and how he was going to age John and, use Jor-El and things like that. I said, great, go for it. And part of it is where he wanted to get with John being part of the Legion of Superheroes, which I totally understand. And the idea that you would have a Superboy who is a core member of the Legion of Superheroes is very much what the Legion is all about. Those of you who know the Legion of Superheroes and its history. So I was totally on board with it. And I think there are always ways that if they wanted to do kind of a series of backstories that tell the untold stories of Superman and Lois and young John when he was still, 8 years old, that I think you could still have your cake and eat it too, that you can do both. But certainly I don't have a problem with this idea that you want to take John Kent as Superboy and make him this foundational core member of the Legion of Superheroes, because that's the history in a lot of respects of what the Legion has always been.
It makes sense. I hated that they aged him and took him away from Superman just because, like I said, I loved that story of Superman being the dad. And I hate that that's, gone. But
sure. And I understand that reaction too. And as I said, we've seen this many times in comics where there's been, this untold tales of whatever character, whether it's Batman or, we've seen that many times. And I think there still should be a way to do some of those stories for the people who like that version. But that doesn't mean you can't have both somehow. Because again, it's comics. We should be able to do a lot more than we do that way.
All right. So that was, like I said, part of my interview and Phil's interview with Dan Jurgens. That's the little bit you're going to get. It's a little odd and shaky because it's from different parts of the conversation, but I do say go listen to Capes and Lunatics on the Nightwing News and check out the full interview with Dan. All right? And remember,
Look up in the sky.